So when we talk about resilience, we can think about many things. We often think of resilience as being able to survive through toughness. Many scientists will think about the kind of theoretical framings of resilience. And today I kind of want to put resilience in conversation with the idea of vulnerability and balance those against each other. We'll get through that. And so the idea is that if we create vulnerability through our scarcity. So the idea is we kind of have put waste and degrade our resources so that we can erode our quality of life. Not only creating these climate change impacts through doing that, but kind of amplifying those climate change impacts. And this is really also reflected in our soil systems. As we degrade the soil systems that support us, we of course erode their capacity to support us. And this kind of scarcity of soil-based systems creates our vulnerability. And I'll put then resilience in that counter, and I'm thinking about resilience through abundance. And that is the idea of where we steward these resources, our soil resources and the systems that they support to improve these quality of benefits. And while we're doing that, we're mitigating, we're countering climate change, and we're also then countering the impacts that we still don't feel, right? So we're thinking about this creation of abundance. So how does this connect? Obviously, abundance is a great language that applies to many aspects. How does it apply to soil? How does it apply to urban soil? And so we have to think about the many ways in which our cities kind of create this scarcity and leave us vulnerable. And I think a good framing, and this is building off the classic work of ethnographer Sharon Strauss on waste and want, is that when we waste our resources, we are often left wanting and then vulnerable. And we can think about our natural resources like our organic materials that we quite literally put into waste streams and throw away. When our ecological systems, of course, see those as core resources, as core nutrients to grow and thrive and be resilient. We also can be quite wasteful in the landscapes that we do create in urban spaces for ecological systems to create these simple water-hungry systems that really aren't leveraging a whole lot of benefit, but they do use a lot of resources in our lawns. And then, of course, this is LA. We have a lot of sprawl, and we still have a lot of pavement in that sprawl. And our city is dominated by a paved land cover, kind of in service of kind of a wasteful mobility based around the king car, right? So we have a lot of paved surfaces, a lot of lost opportunity for ecological or other systems. And then where we do create spaces for this, we often degrade those resources or neglect those resources and not take advantage of them. So that brings us really to how do soils help us create abundance? How do soils create a resilient city that prepares us for climate change? Of course, if we're able to store these soils, we create these healthier urban ecosystems all around that have their many benefits, these nature-based solutions. We can help create more robust water resources by having systems that are able to soak in and add to our water resources, either through benefiting the nature that we have in the city or through water resource supply going forward. They help really cool our neighborhoods as soils that reservoir of water and support for the urban nature that keeps us cool. And then as part of a larger land use of housing, of mobility, of energy production, these soils and nature-based solutions can be part of carbon storage, part of climate mitigation. So doing this switches the flip and puts us on a path towards abundance. We move from waste towards abundance, and therein lies our resilience. And so if we think about our big building climate resilience framework for the day, we can put these array of threats and challenges that we face around legacy pollution, around land use, around climate change impacts as our vulnerabilities. And we can think about the creating of these multi-benefit nature-based solutions as our resilience in the system. And to get there from our vulnerabilities to our resistance, of course, we need to remove harmful systems and structures that are challenging us. But of course, then the absence of harm is not the presence of care. We have to then create the nurturing and protective cities that provide our abundance. And we know that we have the degraded resources in the middle. We know that we don't have all the knowledge and path that we want to get to there. And so moving from vulnerabilities to resilience, what we'll see today is that we're putting soil and its restoration and the practices around soil to kind of build it away from the historical systems to the desired systems, and defining this pathway and building this pathway. And so it's new, right? It's not new. We've been managing soils for a while, but we're thinking about these systems as doing so much more for us and being really critical infrastructure to get right. And so resilience through urban soils means setting out, figuring out what to do, going through it, learning and building and doing more. So we're put out this adaptive loop here today, and many of the speakers are going to really kind of be able to couch where they're at, why they're doing within this adaptive loop. But it starts with set goals. Of course, we had a phase 1 needs assessment. We set goals around soils in a big way, but we use our existing knowledge. We use our societal needs. We take community input. We figure out, what do we want to do? What do we want to create, right? And then we have to go learn. We'll learn today soils are really complex. We have to know about the site and soils conditions that are there and understand that gap between that that exists, and those are the objectives that we want, right? And then from once we know where are we at, where do we want to be, this is where we now decide. We put together this, what we're calling an ensemble soil management practices for achieving those objectives. And I think one important thing today is, as a society, we know a lot about soils. We know a lot about practices that we can use to manage those soils to reach our objectives. And so we can put in place a set of practices that we know based on that. Once we kind of are able to decide and get to those, we know what we can do, and then we can implement it and get the workforce and put these pieces in place to design, install, and manage our ensemble BMPs landscape. Now, I say we know a lot about soil, but you know, urban environments can be really different, can really challenge our understanding. And so that, and we're also asking them for some critical performance. So even though we know basically how soils work and what practices we do, we need to actually evaluate how are they doing in this urban context. And I mean this both in a way of ecologically what services they're performing, what might we not have foreseen, but then also we're building our own assessment of, do we like what's happening? What are we thinking about this? What opportunities does it arise? And then we come back into our new understanding of the world and start all over, set our goals, make it bigger, understand more, and pursue new opportunities. And so this is what you'll see reflected is a lot of the speakers acting across this loop and in different parts of this loop, especially when we get the demonstrations that are implementing and monitoring and redefining what we know and where we want to go with our goals. And I'll just quick bring up, I know Rich and some of the other speakers might cover these things more, but we want to provide a little guidance to decision making. There are many practices out there, and how do we organize what we need to do? Well, I think we know that soils, while they connect us all, we're really interested in many other things. That what do they connect us? Because we're interested in other things. We're interested in tree health, agriculture, maybe recreation, maybe dealing with soil contamination. So we have all these interests that aren't soils per se, but soil is key to all of them. And so then we need to think about, if we're interested in this, what is it about soil that we need to evaluate? There are issues of organic matter, compaction, protecting that soil from damage, how much soil, geodiversity, which is something of the stage for biodiversity. Who are the actors in nature's play? We might think about contamination, might address engineering, and we could think about some guidance on, if I'm interested in this, do I need to consider this? And we can think about often, sometimes, and rarely, and then guide towards that giant library of practices that would address that soil concern, that would help us reach our goals. And so we have this coming together. And at last, I'll leave off, this kind of is a great visualization that puts together this idea of the benefits we want and the different soil concerns that are underlying it that we need to do. And I bring it up today, and some other speakers will present this great graphic by TreePeople's landscape architect, Emily Tyre. in saying that we're going to have a language, a visual language of products that you're seeing here today that are, when in their complete and attributed form, will be made available for the community to use to help share their own messages and their own reports. And so I think we'll have a lot of exciting visual materials that you will see today that will be made available to you to help us move towards our goals collectively.